This is a chat with Chris Hadnagy, founder and CEO of Social-Engineer LLC. Chris has 2 decades of experience in the science of human hacking and has authored many books on the topic. Chris has mastered the art of social engineering through physical penetration testing, where he breaks into buildings to test their security, and digital campaigns such as sending millions of phishing emails. Chris works with the latest technologies, currently experimenting with deepfake CEO fraud. In this conversation, we explore why we should all learn social engineering, how it will evolve over time, and we even do a real-life demo of a physical pen test, and lots more. Enjoy! Yeah, so my first question would be, you've talked in your books and through various podcasts and shows about how to exploit the human today, or in your 20 years of experience. But humans will always kind of have to have humans can never have a zero trust model, right? We have to an extent, trust other people and trust the objects around us and the trains and whatever. So how will that evolve? Will humans begin to trust different things differently, especially in the era of AI? And therefore, will your social engineering techniques have to change over the next 20, 30 years?
Well, AI is definitely going to change a lot in society. I would say that it's I think what you said is important. We don't want to ever make people paranoid. Trust is the way we propagate as a species. So we have to be able to trust. But we have to also have some more self-awareness. Self-awareness that if I'm interacting with someone, whether it's phone, email, video, in person, if I start to feel a strong emotional response, self-awareness should say, okay, I need to calm down and realize I might be getting exploited, right? Because that's what social engineering is. They're trying to make you feel some emotion that will make you take an action so you're not using critical thought. So we have to be more self-aware with that. And also with AI and its constant advancement, I think we have to get to the point where you trust but verify. And if you can't verify, and I can tell you this right now, I can't verify if a video I see of the President of the United States is real or not. So if I can't verify it, I can't trust it, right? Now, if it's on the whitehouse.gov, okay, I can probably trust that. But if it's on TikTok or YouTube or Facebook or something like that, I have to tell myself, well, this is not verifiable, so I can't trust it.
But do you, as a human, have the bandwidth to be able to verify everything or anything? How would you draw the line?
No. That's a great question. So for me, if it's going to directly affect my life, my business, my family, my ability to make an income, something like that, my health, then I'm going to take time to verify it. But if it's some news that, something happened across the globe that really doesn't impact me, unless it's something super important in the world, I'm probably not going to go and verify it. Right. So but I'm also not going to spread it. That's the other thing. When we were having riots here in the US, somebody posted a video saying that during one of the marches, the Black Lives Matter marches, that they were burning a building in Chicago, and they posted this video burning, and people were freaking out, right? Everyone's spreading it everywhere. It ended up that was a building in Lebanon in 1989. That video was from then, So I'm not in Chicago, right? And I'm not trying to be cold and mean, but I'm not in Chicago, so I don't need to go waste my time verify. I don't have family in Chicago. I don't have a bunch of friends in Chicago, so I didn't need to go and verify that. I just looked at it and went, well, if that's happened, that sucks. And I move on with my day until it comes out it's fake news, right? So I'm only going to take time to do that to things that will immediately affect my family, my friends, myself, my job, my business, my employees, things like that.
Yeah. And is that something you've also been doing with textual information so far? And will you now, of course, have to now do that for audio and video as well?
Yeah. So, you have to do it for audio. You have to do it for video. Here during the last elections, someone had created a deep fake of President Biden, his voice, and did phone calls and was able to gather several $1,000s in donations by using his voice. So again, it's one of those things where, okay, let's say you wanted to support President Biden, you go to the official website and you do it. You don't do it, you just get a phone call.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to, there's no medium now that you can just say, I can trust that. You can't, not even in person. Right. So you can't just trust anything anymore. You have to verify everything.
Cool. Slightly related to that, I don't know if you're aware, but recently in Southeast Asia and in China, there's been a lot of what they call pig butchering scams.
Yeah.
and they have been very successful. They rake in billions of dollars every year, and so clearly they've been able to gain the trust of people, and made them give the scammers a whole lot of money. So can you comment on what you think that these scammers are doing that's making them so successful, and I suppose on the other side, how we as a population can be wary of this to maybe not get scammed as much?
So it's the same principles we were talking about before. They're filling a need by giving you an emotion that you're looking for. So kind of like romance scams, right? Someone who just lost their mate, or had a big breakup, a divorce. That scammer is filling the need of, I want to be loved. So they're filling that, of course, maliciously and falsely, in order to then ask for money. Pig butchering, they're becoming your friend. They're becoming like your family. They're becoming somebody that you can trust and confide in. That's something that as humans we want. So now they're able to manipulate your emotions in order for you to give up things that you shouldn't, like your life savings and money and things like that. It comes back to the same principles, that if we are being asked to do something and we're feeling really strong emotion about it, it's a great time to stop and analyze, and even maybe get a third party. Ask someone, hey man, I really feel strongly about giving money to this person, but what do you think? And get someone else's opinion, because you might not be able to critically think if you're hijacked and you're in that emotional state. It's not something easy to do, because in many of the romance scams that I've worked, people feel like they're in love, so they don't want to hear somebody tell them that it's fake, that it's not real. They want to believe that it's a real thing. So that can not always be easy, but if someone's listening to this and saying like, how can I stay safe? Maybe make a script for yourself that like, hey, if I ever get into a situation where I'm feeling overly emotional, that I'm going to make sure I pause, ask myself questions, ask other people for verification, and see what happens from there.
Yeah. And you've also talked about having done lots of physical penetration testing.
Mm-hmm.
How did you begin to do that? Because that didn't really exist not too long ago. Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So, it was like anything, you have to get your first job and you offer it to somebody and be like, hey, I'll when we're sitting with the client and we're saying, what's important to you? So, we're talking to this healthcare facility, what's important to you? And they start naming all the things that would keep them up at night. And one of those things are physical records, right? Like if someone can gain access to our filing system and get physical documents. Well, the only way to do that, to test that, is for me to then come to your building and see if I can break in. And they're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And maybe we should try that. So then we get hired to do it. And now it's like, okay, now we actually got to figure it out. How we're going to do this, breaking into a secure facility. So it was an interesting road. Now it's a lot more acceptable. A lot of government agencies do this around the globe. A lot of large corporations do this now because they want to test physical infrastructure. So a lot of times we're testing security guards, testing their locks and physical infrastructure to make sure it's secure, and also testing technology ability to keep us out of certain areas. So nowadays, because of the threat actors out there, I think a lot of companies see this as something really viable.
Yeah. And how could someone listen to this get interested in physical penetration testing? How could they get into this?
Yeah, so this is what I always tell people. There's a couple steps that you need to take. First, there's no real education that you get that prepares you for this, right? So there's not like a physical pen test course in college or university or anything like that. So I always say, you got to start somewhere. So get a job in a company that does adversarial simulations, and most likely you're going to start at the bottom, right? And you're going to work your way up until they trust you enough to go on one of these jobs. Express your interest in it. I tell people, take part in CTFs, right? There are thousands of them online. And by practicing CTFs, like as an employer, when I'm interviewing someone and they tell me, oh, one of my hobbies is to go compete in CTFs, that tells me this person has a desire to learn. And they also probably have the critical thinking enough to do that. There's nowhere you can practice physically breaking in except for your own house, So by taking part in CTFs, you're showing that I have this desire to become a good hacker, and then I'm actually going to go and do it. And those things can help. I also tell people, write about your experience. Go start a LinkedIn, account and go and write about your experience in getting into the industry, write about the CTFs you're doing, and people are like, well, who cares what I write? They do. You see, the thing is, in this industry, you need to have trust, because think of it, clients are saying, please come break in my building, or here's all my employees' emails, like, phish them. That's a lot of trust. So how do you get trust from complete strangers? Is if they know you. So if they see you online, they see you writing professional things, they see you talking about your experience, they see your path from where you are to where you want to be, they see that helps build trust, and then people will want to work with you more.
Yeah, I'm actually going to Ireland in a few weeks to compete in a CTF.
Oh, awesome.
And there's someone that I've seen online that I want to try and meet in real life, but I don't know where he is, and so I've been trying to do some OSINT to figure that out.
That's cool.
And how do you think OSINT would evolve over time? Especially, in your book, you've written about traditional methods like going to Twitter and X, and looking at people's social media histories, but that's very labor intensive.
It is. I think AI is going to fix that. I think there's going to be some tools that are going to help aggregate all that data, that are going to use artificial intelligence to do things fast. I mean, to me, it's amazing. We were doing a job, not even an OSINT job. We were just doing a job where we need to figure out some things in very large data sets. Like, we're talking over 1,100 pages of data. And, we upload it into chat, and then all of a sudden you can just start asking it questions, and it finds connections that, as a human, it probably would have taken me months to find. Right. And that is what I think we're going to see for the future, is that we're going to be able to point AI at the internet. Right now it's still not really good at that, but there's going to be some tools and say, hey, go find me everything you can on this email address. And it will narrow down our efforts. I think we're still always going to have false positives. So we're going to need to verify, but it's going to help us with mass quantities of data. So we don't have to really stress about doing that manually as much anymore.
Yeah.
I wanted to pivot slightly and talk about groups of people who tend to be good at sort of social engineering. So in my mind, politicians and scammers, as we touched on earlier, they're all fundamentally, their job involves social engineering to some extent, right? So could you sort of touch on that fact? And also, do you have opinions on do you think these politicians are actually good at social engineering, and do you think these scammers are particularly good, or are they just able to achieve what they want even if they're not great?
So my definition of social engineering kind of broadens it out. So I think that's why I agree it fits many things. So I define it as any act that influences a person to take an action that may or may not be in their best interests. Because I think social engineering has positive and negative, right? I mean, we use it every day. We use it every day when we're talking with our friends, our family, our partners, whatever it is, we're using it. And it's not always one-sided or malicious. It may just be that we're trying to influence someone's decision, and it's not bad, right? So that's social engineering. If you go to a therapist, they're using social engineering, right? They're trying to influence how you're going to react in the next circumstance by giving you data, right? Now, scammers, I think that over the years, they have gotten better, because what we have seen is that, like on the dark web, there's a lot of centralized education for the bad guys. Threat actor groups do not mind sharing information. Unlike professionals, we tend to not be so open and sharing, but the threat actors are out there and they write manuals on how to do this. There's manuals on how to do pig butchering. There's manuals on how to scam teenagers out of credit cards and photos. There's manuals for this stuff that they just offer for free. They don't have to buy it. So I think that the educational resources for that are good. And when it comes to politicians, I think it's both. It's I think some are good and some are bad, right? Some are trained in nonverbals, trained in self-control, trained in speech and like rhythm, speed, volume, pitch. They're trained in those things, and that makes them easier to influence others, and others aren't. So I think it depends on the person. The same with scammers. Some are really good and some are not.
So are some people naturally good at social engineering? And if you think they are, then what would have made them good? Is it something to do with their genetics? Is it luck? Is it growing up they had some sort of factor? What could it be?
Yeah, there are some natural, really good natural people at SE. And I think it's mostly upbringing. So I've noticed a couple different factors. People who were raised in trying circumstances, either the abusive families or coming from a different country and having to learn a language, those people tend to be very good at social engineering. because you especially abusive families, you have to learn how to read people very quick, right? Like what's going to trigger mom or dad? What's going to trigger this situation? So from a very young age, you're analyzing everything and learning how to get in and out of situations. People like Joe Navarro, he came from Cuba to America. When he came here, he knew no English. So he had to learn how to read people, how to communicate with other things besides words. So that makes him, very, very good at the job. I think there's other factors, like people maybe who are raised in households where they have freedom to speak and to act, and they're able to be goofy, and they're have no problem standing up and getting laughs and things like that. Those all make great talents for being a social engineer. I think it's more of our upbringing than it is genetics. I mean, naturally, some people can be introverted. I had a guy that worked with me here, Ryan, serious introvert, but he was amazing at social engineering. Right? He had to teach himself. He has to get out of his shell to do it. But if you have that desire, then you will.
Is social engineering a skill that you think more people should have? And if so, where should they be applying this skill?
Yeah, 100%. I think everyone should. I mean, my fifth book I just wrote, the blue one right here, that is not for pen testers or security people. That book was kind of after 20 years of doing this. I said, you know what, these skills are good for everybody. When I taught my kids these skills, I teach classes that come from psychology, from teachers, from all sorts of things. So I think everybody can use these skills, and it's just a matter of intent. How do you use them? What is your intention when using these skills? If my intention is to get everything I want and hurt you in doing so, well, that's bad and that's malicious. But if my intention is to use these skills to become a better communicator and to be able to negotiate deals, then why is it bad? Get a raise? Those kinds of things.
Because
I think that's fair.
You heard of the book, The 48 Laws of Power?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. That is written very much in a way as if you're some evil being that you want to gain all of these laws to become the most powerful person there is. But equally, loads of people have read the book to apply to their business or whatever, to apply to some positive aspect. So I think there's always two sides to this coin. And how can you try and manage that? Like, how do you stop yourself from maybe becoming too influential or crossing that line of crossing a boundary?
Yeah, I think that comes back. That's a really good question, by the way. I think that comes back to self-awareness, right? So if you're self-aware, then you will realize, hey, I'm starting to use this in the wrong way, right? And another thing I tell all my people, and every time I teach, you got to keep high levels of empathy. If you practice being empathetic, then you won't use it maliciously, right? If you empathize with somebody, you will know that if I start doing this, I'm going to actually hurt them. Like, I'm going to leave them not feeling better for having met me. So empathy and good self-awareness, those two things can really help you never go to the dark side.
Yeah.
You mentioned empathy because what I found interesting was reading about people who are sociopathic and psychopaths, because essentially they tend to be very good at social engineering.
Yeah.
But they tend to lack empathy. Now, for me, I just found it fascinating, but do you have any insight as to if that can be reversed almost, if they can be helped to become more empathetic, or similarly, is there anything we can learn from them because they're so good at social engineering?
Yeah, there's always things we can learn, but the thing, like, talk about psychopathy, I mean, there has such a high level of narcissism that there would not be self-awareness there with the desire to change, right? And depending on the type of psychopath, they might find pleasure from other people's pain, destruction, everything in their path. So I don't see a time where someone's going to be like, I should change this and use these skills for good. And sociopathic people lack I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe they lack the ability to feel empathy. So those two groups, which are not normal psychology, they fall on the malicious side, right? You think about someone who could sextort a teenager and then encourage them to commit suicide after they get what they want. That person has to be sociopathic, right? Because there's no way that I could never do that to another human, regardless of what they did. Right? I couldn't imagine doing that to another human. The devastation that would occur. So yeah, I think you when you see those kinds of people, I think what we learn is what not to do. We learn this is something I don't ever want to become, and I don't want to do this. All of their methodology is manipulative, negative, and very self-serving. So I would not use those methods at all.
And as a social engineer, stereotypes are fantastic because say you had, obviously, and I think you've talked about this many times, but say you had a woman and a man both trying to break into some sort of building, well, and you're both posing as construction workers or something like that.
Mhm.
Well, it makes sense for the man to act as the boss because that's just what we expect.
Yeah.
But we're seeing it slowly, very slowly, but those stereotypes are beginning to weaken. And so do you see a time, maybe 50 years from now, where that stereotype doesn't exist? And does that then make your job as a social engineer harder?
I can't foresee the future, right? If history dictates, if history proves anything, it probably won't change that much, sadly. But let's say it did. No, it wouldn't make my job harder because 70% of my company are women. So if all of a sudden all the bosses on earth are women, then we'll just let them be the boss, and I'll be their second in command, right? And the job of a social engineer is to understand the biases that exist in the place that you're going and use those biases, right? So if I'm going to, like, let's say a woman's shelter, and then we're testing that, some woman-owned company, then I shouldn't be the best. I'm probably not the best choice to be the lead there. I should use one of my female employees because they're going to build rapport with that company more. But if I'm breaking into like a, predominantly 50-year-old white male defense contractor, then I should not send in my 20-something-year-old female employee because that's going to look really odd, right? So the pretext has to be based on where you're going and what you think the biases will be. So that won't make it harder. We'll just have to think more. If things change, we just got to start coming up with new ideas.
And could you touch on what motivates you to do what you do, and also what group of people or organization or anything do you see as the biggest resistance to the work that you do?
Well, I kind of created all this by mistake, so it wasn't something I planned on. I'd written the framework in 2008 and thought it was just fun. I put it online in 2009. A couple months later, Kevin Mitnick's publisher called me and asked me to write my first book. That came out in 2010. And when that book came out, people were calling me from all over the globe, asking me to come speak, teach, train, do SE things. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe there's a business here. And I started it. Now, what motivates me now is it's actually a great industry to be in, and we're really helping. Right? If you do it the right way, I see companies every day that now have a fighting chance, right? Have a fighting chance to survive all the threat actors out there because of the work that we're doing. And that feels good. It feels good to, not every job on earth is something that impacts society, right? So I think I enjoy it for that reason. Also, it's a lot of fun, just to be honest. I mean, I'm not going to be like a mall do-gooder. It's a lot of fun to hack people and to break in buildings. I mean, that's something I never thought I'd be doing. If you told 19-year-old me this was going to be my career, I'd be like, no, doesn't sound reasonable at all, right? I think the biggest threat to us are the organized threat actor groups, because they've grown, by hundreds over the last couple of years on the dark web. They are so organized and they're not bound by time, right? So a CISO of a company I work with, at 5 p.m. he goes home, right? He goes home to his family. That company is left unattended for the night. The threat actor groups, they don't rest, right? They're constantly learning, constantly building new things. They're motivated by the win. So there is not a time where they go, okay, guys, let's go home. It's 5 p.m. We're done hacking for today. That's a big threat, right? Because that means we need to be better at our jobs. And, you can't tell the average employee, well, just don't ever go home. You have to work 24/7, right? Doesn't work that way.
Yeah. And we thought it'd be interesting if you can almost kind of simulate some sort of physical pen test, almost like as a text adventure right now. So we're going to give you a scenario and a task. Okay. And at each point, just kind of say, well, maybe the top one or two things you might want to do are. and then we'll maybe come up with a response for you, and then we can continue that for a few steps.
Okay.
So we're going to both choose a task that we both know quite well. And so we're going to say, for example, you need to breach a school and you need to install a USB stick on a computer within this school. That's all I'm telling you. Well, what's your first thoughts? What are you doing now?
OSINT. I'm going to do OSINT. I'm going to do OSINT to figure out who would be allowed. I mean, besides students, who would be allowed in the school and why. And I need to know, are there third-party vendors that enter the school? Are there food delivery people? Are there vending machines? What do the janitors look like and what do they wear? What are the hours of the school? How is the school protected in security when it's closed? Is it locked? Is it alarmed? Is there RFID? I would look for those kinds of things to find out if it was a clear reason for me being there, so I can be walking around the school and not trigger any alarms.
Yeah, so there is security. There's a security team, a couple people. There are CCTV cameras everywhere. But every Saturday there is a football game. And of course, students will come and parents can come, and parents from other schools can come to watch their child play. So could you use that as a way in?
Of course. And I would imagine that when the football game is going on, that the school's bathrooms are open. So that means you have access to the building at this point. So I would definitely use that. I would have to find out if the security team is active on Saturdays when there's a football game, or is there not? Or is there no security on the weekends? If there is security,
there's very little security.
Very little security. Okay, then if there's no security or very little security, then it's basically open door, right? So all I've got to do is just find a way into the building and to a computer where I can put my malicious code.
So the problem is the computers are in buildings that are locked on Saturdays, which is not the same building as a sports building. And I guess you can pick the lock, but there are cameras that would see you picking a lock. However, there is one room in the sports building that is usually locked, but not always locked, that might have a computer in. So say you want to target that room, or maybe you don't. How would you get to that computer?
Well, I guess it depends on what the room is used for during the sporting event, because if it's just let's say a computer room that was left unlocked, then most likely it's not inhabited. So I'd be able to just walk in and insert the USB key. But also what I would do with the other building is I would drop USB keys with malware on it, and I would label the documents inside those, or label the USB key something like 2025 layoffs, or employee bonuses, or grades, something like that. That way the people who find it would be curious enough as I got to put this in the computer and find out what's on this. Then or one of the big ones is just label it pics. And people love what kind of pictures are these? I got to go find out. People insert that. So instead of having to do it myself, I would make someone else do the job for me by dropping USB keys in random places that would be seen on Monday when they came back, and then have them inserted.
But now is where it gets exciting, because there was someone who saw you from 100 meters away, who kind of saw you scatter a couple of USB keys near the buildings. And now they're going to walk up to you, and they ask who you are and what you're doing. And what do you say?
I say, well, I'm just here for the football game, watching my kid play football.
So why are you scattering USB keys everywhere?
I did? I must have dropped one out of my pocket. Where did it go?
And why does it say, oh, you teach or something? It says grades on it. Where do you teach?
Oh, yeah. I'm a teacher at the other school that they're playing against. I'm here watching my kid. I teach math.
Nice. Enjoy the match.
Okay, thanks. See you later. Oh, thanks for finding my USB key.
Yeah, so I guess what are the key things that you kind of have to look out for during a physical pen test, just generally speaking?
So it would be things like cameras, the type of technology that's in use, if security is 24/7 or not. In this country, if security is armed or not.
Yes.
Those things all have to be considered when we're doing physical assessments, because there could be that can change the pretext quite often. And again, back to the OSINT. Who are their vendors? Who's their internet provider? Who does their cleaning? Who does their electrical, their air conditioning? Those things we would look at to make sure that if we could figure out a pretext that would make us invisible, right? That's the whole goal, is like when we're going in, that if someone were to stop us, I'd be able to have an excuse for being there. And I don't have an excuse if I don't know. If I say, oh, I'm from waste management, and they're like, well, we don't use waste management. Why are you here? Right. So, that would, of course, then blow my cover. So the more knowledge I have about how that company operates and the things that they do, the easier it will be for me to be able to talk my way out of it if I get stopped.
And you've done many interviews and podcasts. And so what's, I guess, the number one thing that you want people to know as we round off today?
I would say that if you do decide to learn these skills, use them for good, right? Use them for good. Practice empathy. That's lacking in this world today, and we can use more of it. There's a lot of things you can do with social engineering skills. It helps you become a master communicator. So you can become a negotiator, a teacher. You can become in the information security field, an educator, like cyber educator. There's so many things that you can learn to do with these skills. So I encourage people to learn them just to better their lives, but to always practice it with empathy.
If anybody wants to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go? What can they do?
So LinkedIn is probably my most active social media. You can find me on there, or you can go to social-engineer.com. That's our corporate site. And in November, we're running a conference here in America, in Orlando, called the Human Behavior Conference. So people can find information about that at humanbehaviorcon.com. It's a 2-day conference that's going to blend science and information security.
Awesome. And I'll put all of those links in the description if people are interested in checking out your work.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you so much for that conversation. It was really interesting.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the conversation, please like and subscribe to Waffle Bite. You can find out more about Chris and his extensive work through the QR code on screen or the links in the description down below. Bye.